Kidnapping is big business in Italy. Within the last 10 years, the families of over 400 wealthy Italians have paid ransoms totaling over $100 million. Since we first broadcast this story last January, the epidemic has intensified. More than one major kidnapping a week in Italy. 60 Minutes took a look at the Italian kidnap industry. It's a risk to be a moneyed Italian these days. You're a tempting target for the kidnappers. So rich men's chauffeurs are going to school to learn how to keep the boss from being snatched. Unis Hedricks, a Dutchman and ex-racing driver, teaches bodyguards and drivers for millionaire industrialists how to turn on a dime in a 180-degree arc worthy of a jewel thief on the run. This anti-kidnap course takes 3 days and costs a staggering $1,400. But it could avert a multi-million-dollar ransom. Example, Giovanni Bulgari, Roman jeweler, jet-set figure, kidnapped driving home from work. Ransom demand, $15 million. Ransom paid, $2 million.
They tried to convince me to send a message to my brother, to convince him to pay the amount of ransom that they wanted. And I said no. They wanted something like $3 million. And so they said, you have to just send your brother a message saying that he has to give $3 million.
A business negotiation.
Absolutely. And I tell you, unfortunately, this kind of thing has to be handled strictly and very coolly like a business negotiation.
Example, a relative by marriage of billionaire industrialist Gianni Agnelli, Mrs. Barbara Navaretti, the golden hostage, they called her. Ransom demand, $5 million. Ransom paid, $1 million.
I was yelling and screaming. I was asking, what you doing? You're taking the wrong person. You know that I have no money and I will never be able to pay any ransom. And they kept saying, just hitting me at that time. They want me to keep quiet.
Hitting you?
Yes.
But not hard. I mean, they weren't.
Very hard.
Really? They cut off your hair, gave you a crew cut.
Very bad crew cut, I should say. But it's because they wanted to make a first step to show to my family that if they were not going to pay the ransom, then they would cut other pieces. They put it in they would cut my ears, they would cut my fingers. They threatened me all the time with that.
Example, Lorenzo Lapin Peregrini, abducted on his way to school. Ransom demand, $1 million. Ransom paid, $200,000. His father remembers.
I can't cry anymore because I haven't any more tears. I spent them all when they took away my son. And I consider life has a debt with me today because I used to enjoy life. I used to enjoy every moment of my life. Now I consider life is indebted to me for what's happened because I didn't deserve it.
It turns out that kidnapping has a long history in Italy. It began a millennium ago here in the rugged mountains of Sardinia. First, it was sheep, carried off and held for ransom. The first human was abducted here in 1477. The kidnappers were shepherds who knew the terrain, the trails, and hideouts. Even today, these Sardinians still provide much of the manpower for the kidnap gangs that operate on the mainland. In the villages like Orgosolo here, surrounded by the Barbagian mountains, the old religious ceremonies, the primitive rituals, the feudal mores survive. But the most effective kidnappers, we were told, are spawned here. Cunning, resourceful, contemptuous of law and order. The local art teacher tells the story on the walls of the village streets and alleys. It is common knowledge that Orgosolo is the center of banditry, of kidnapping on the island of Sardinia. And though this town's 5,000 inhabitants would insist that they are peaceful peasants who make their living mainly from sheep, The local police chief tells us that there is not a family hereabouts that doesn't have a stake in the kidnap industry. Nor is there a family hereabouts who'll talk about it, because everyone observes omerta, the code of silence. It is virtually useless for the police to make an arrest. No witnesses will talk. If they do speak to the police, if they testify in a kidnap case, it is tantamount to a death sentence at the hands of their neighbors, for the code of silence is more respected here than civil law. Kidnapping in Italy has now trickled down from the very wealthy to the merely affluent. Case history of a recent kidnapping, that of an engineer on a visit from Milan. Carlo Travaglino and his wife recall their ordeal. We have reconstructed the main events. Dining with friends at a remote restaurant, Travaglino was unaware his kidnapping was being organized with an inside informant. His friends often dined here, so their habits had been closely observed. They finished dinner at 10:30 and started down the winding mountain road toward Agosolo. Rounding a curve, they came upon a roadblock of boulders and 10 masked men armed with machine guns and rifles. Travaglino was the only one taken, since the kidnappers knew that he was healthy and could endure the long blindfolded hike to a hideout.
Finally, I was left in a cave, still blindfolded. They gave me some blankets, a sleeping bag and some food. Local salami and cheese. Once they got me some whiskey. We moved to another hideout every 4 or 5 days.
But it took 15 days for the kidnappers to send their ransom note by mail to Mrs. Travaglino. She immediately contacted a lawyer.
He became the intermediary. For the first meeting, he was to drive along a deserted road and watch for a plastic bag in the road, exchange a signal and the password. Negotiations started in front of the car headlights. They demanded 1,000 million lire, about $1 million. At the second meeting, the lawyer could only bring 16 million lire. It was not acceptable.
There were several meetings between the lawyer and the kidnap gang. Then, a compromise of $200,000 was reached. It had to be delivered in 2 plastic bags in 10,000 lira notes. Mrs. Travaglino raised the money half as a bank loan, the rest from relatives and friends. The following day, Travaglino was free, found by the police. They arrested 4 kidnappers. 6 more are still latitanti on the run. The leader got 28 years. That's a maximum sentence. How did the police locate the cave? Hideouts are nearly impossible to find in these mountains. This time there had been an informant. As for the man who broke the code of silence, who informed on his fellow kidnappers, who told the police where it was that Travaglino had been held for ransom, he died. He was shot down here, on the spot that Travaglino was kidnapped. Shot, we are told, by one of his fellow kidnappers, who escaped. This man is one of the kidnappers. The police know him, and we were told he was the killer too, but no one will testify. The fact that he is not behind bars illustrates only one of the frustrations that plague Italian justice. Leslie Peregrini.
The only way to stop it is to reinstate the death penalty in Italy. That's the only way to stop kidnapping. You put them against the wall, and then they'll find that kidnapping will stop immediately.
Almost everyone we talked with blamed the inefficiency of the Italian police, the permissiveness of Italian law, and the interminable paralysis of Italian courts for Italy's kidnap dilemma. 2 separate, competitive police forces deal with kidnap cases. It seems that no one is in charge. The Carabinieri belong to the Ministry of Defense. They are tough and organized, but unsubtle. Their kidnap investigations are like military operations, and not often successful. The National Police Force, under the Ministry of Interior, seems mainly bewildered by the rash of abductions. Their roadblocks net them little. Their sleuthing comes off amateur by our standards. If we found any coordination among law enforcement agencies, it was here at Criminal Pole in Rome. This is their FBI. They have an impressive research laboratory, an anti-kidnapping squad, but they too have made little headway against the kidnappers. They are up against well-organized crime, some of whose leaders are said to be mafia.
Mafia probably is interested in kidnappings because they have the organization. But I think that we have also other sectors of organized crime also interested in kidnapping.
How many kidnappings last year, Dr. Ruggieri?
62.
How many were solved?
40 cases.
How much ransom was paid?
More or less $40 million.
And how much was recovered?
It is more or less a quarter of the sum.
Only $10 million recovered. So it becomes apparent that it is a successful operation for Italian kidnappers, a lucrative operation.
Decidedly, it is a very profitable crime.
And one which you police are finding very difficult to solve.
Yes, not to solve, to prevent it.
Because the police are ineffectual and muddled, many of the wealthy have taken matters into their own hands. A new industry has been established. Security services offering private bodyguards known as guerrillas. Officially illegal, but effective. The streets are patrolled by these vigilantes who, for a very good price, will protect your body and your property. They're expensive, but chances are you won't be kidnapped if you employ them. In northern Italy, a small, specialized automobile firm, the Fontana Brothers, sells custom-made Fiats that come equipped with bulletproof glass, sealed windows, electrically locked doors, and other protective devices. Guard dogs are trained to maul unexpected attackers. They sell for up to $4,000 apiece, yet this kennel near Rome does a thriving business as the demand for fierce Alsatians skyrockets.
I condemn the fact that the population is not stirred enough because the press does not do enough work to move them to do something, because they are only moved if a person of their own family is touched.
One Italian, not content to accept kidnapping as the status quo, has devised a plan. This maverick assistant DA in Milan, Ferdinando Pomarici, has made it difficult, even criminal, to raise the money for a ransom. And he has effectively blocked those payments. How do you block the payment?
When we know there is been a kidnapping, we freeze the family's bank account. We block their funds.
So the bank commits a crime if it gives money for ransom?
Yes. It can be the bank or an individual, like a lawyer or a friend or a relation. Anyone who gives money to family without any ask could be committing a crime.
Because the money is dried up, there has not been a kidnapping in Milan since March. But Pomarici's plan, unaccountably, has not been adopted elsewhere in Italy.
I'm afraid that law and order, which used to be one of the topics Italian politics, has been bypassed by other topics which seems to be more crucial to the Italian society, which is economic survival.
You seem to be saying, Mr. Bulgaria, that kidnapping in Italy is simply going to continue.
It's become such a widespread thing that, you know, people who were before involved in all the kind of criminals action, they found out that it was much more profitable to go into the kidnapping business.
Low risk, high profit, the national pastime.
That's the name of the game.
The game, too infrequently, ends here, and it takes forever to get here. So long that these men, on trial for a kidnapping 5 years old, had since been involved with more kidnappings. And there's a small fry, not the brains. In the Navarrete case, only 2 of the 15 men thought to be involved have been convicted. In the Peregrini abduction, 2 out of 14. In the Bulgari kidnapping, 2 out of a dozen.
Come on.
So, where does this leave us? Kidnapping here in Italy, as we have heard over and over again, is low risk, high profit. There is no great social or political pressure against it, no loud public outcry. Much of it is mafia organized, which means it is efficient, and the police work is at best slow and inefficient. There are worse problems here, many of them. It seems apparent that the kidnap industry in Italy will survive and prosper.